Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Talking in Stations. Unfortunately, Matterall is sick today, so you are stuck with that annoying Git from the Alliance tournament. We have the usual panel of assemble nerds with us today, but we are joined by special guests Jin Tan from the CSM and CVA. How you doing, buddy?
Great, and 1,000 greetings to everyone listening.
And we're also joined by special guest Fafer of the Far East DRF block. How you doing, Fafer?
Hello, hello.
So, again, plus the initial panel, which use names you can see listed, we have a ton of stuff to talk about today, and a lot of people who can talk about not very much, a ton. So we're going to get straight into it with talking about the East first, which is, of course, why we have the lovely Favor here. There is a story recently about the Tri Keep Star that got laid down and is under and has been an assault point, conflict point in New Eden. Fafer, do you want to give us kind of like initially just kind of the overarching story, like the blurb on the back of the book, as it were?
Well, DRF and Triumvirate and their helpers are in mutual war. There has been a lot info about that from both sides. Would you like me to go into that, or more like a current situation?
Just go into it. Just take your time to kind of express what's been going on, so people have a good idea of the flavor of the conflict.
Well, it goes back a lot of months in the past, at the point where the game was very stale, and Triumvirate felt dire need for content. And since they helped test to get their place where they are now, they basically lost the southern content zone. And they tried to deploy a bit to attack Guardians of the Galaxy, but they weren't able to do much or like anything. So they went back to their lands, and they were very nervous because there was no content, and they like to read Reddit a lot, and Reddit was full of doom sayings about how Eve is dying, etc. And I think all that compounded to pressure on Tri leadership, so they did something radical, and they decided to break relationship with the DRF.
And so far, has this conflict between Tri and the DRF, has it caused any kind of meaningful pain to the DRF in terms of assets loss or ships loss, or is it more of just an ongoing conflict that both sides are kind of enjoying?
Well, I think that both sides are enjoying the conflict. It is a content. I think Triumvirate is enjoying it less because they're about to lose. There was one opening point of war when they went into diplomatic offensive to get CO2 on their side, fraternity, and they tried to test, but that did not work. So even at that moment, I think their leadership was aware that they will lose eventually.
Yeah. And then what's the
And-
specifics about this specific Keepstar?
Well, this Keepstar is very important from several standpoints because, first of all, it's called Trinity Reichstag. So definitely, it invites people to siege the Reichstag. And secondly, DRF killed basically all the iHubs, or if you want to say it, all the index in the region of Insmatter, so they can't economically use the region. And this Keepstar is just a platform that enable them to project over the Insmatter, and their removal will be, let's say, a big push for DRF, and it will then not be so easy for their Supers and Titans to operate. And they will have to be logged in and tethered on their Fortizars, so we will have more info about their intentions. And I think from that point on, it will be like the fall of Reichstag. Of course, they may want to try hard a bit, but DRF is here to win the war, and DRF knows how to fight wars. So that's
Is
that.
the is the goal to remove Tri from that area?
Yes.
And can you speak a little bit about the tactics that are going on down there in terms of how the Keepstar is being attacked? What you guys are using? Are you using subcapitals? Are you using capitals? If you're using super capitals, in what way are you using them? Meaning, are you launching fighters from 1,000 kilometers away from a Fortizar somewhere on grid? How are they defending it?
Yeah. Well, as you know, it's not easy to attack the Keepstar. You need to have certain amount of people and certain amount of firepower to attack it. You need to have to be in the attack position with the replacements and so on. So we, like everyone else, online the Fortizar on their grid to be able to stage. And the thing with the Keepstars is that the more people you put into system, the more tie-dye you get, and then every mistake is compounded by the normal timer of the Keepstar. So we try to do this, how to say, economically. We are not as big as NCNPL or Goons, so we try to use subcaps as much as possible, and we keep other things to escalate as much as China does.
Do you think
So,
that? Sorry.
so like we try to reinforce. First time there keeps that with minimalistic force using fighters only, so-called trebuchet thing with the fighters. Although we do not use MGD DESIs, but they undocked a lot of carriers and they use their defensive SS fighters, which is kind of funny, SS fighters defending Trim Reichstag. But but they were able to thwart that attack. But it was also for us to see what they can undock, what they can probe. We were probing, and we tried second time, and this time we brought just enough to reinforce, and the second time also. So we are confident that this Reichstag will go down. If not on Tuesday, then for sure very soon, because.
Now,
And I want to ask Jintan, as someone, with your videos where you kind of discuss the political landscape of Eve, in terms of an outside perspective of someone who pays attention, how does this conflict compare to the other conflicts that are going on at the moment from kind of like an overall perspective?
I've still been trying to figure out kind of like where my perspective lies on this specific continuation conflict, because really it's just an echo of what happened in the Blue Donut War. We're still seeing that kind of turmoil in the South as people try and figure out, what regions belong to who, where do the sphere of influences lie, and all that sort of thing, especially after the death of FCON. Um, in terms of how it compares, it's definitely a lot smaller in scale than, say, even the border skirmish in 9TAC4 was probably bigger in terms of value on the field than this entire war between the DRF and Tri, but it's certainly a very bitter one. Neither party here has any love lost for the other half. I think Fafa can back me up there.
Well, Trailrate use Reddit post squad a lot, and they will say anything to get public opinion on their side or to get more recruits. However, they lost politically in the opening moves of the war because Test did not want to turn off on the deal, turn against the deal with DRF. They stood about their agreement, and that was actually the war lost at that time. The rest is just, how should I say, the echo of that fight in the meta space, in the real space of tranquility.
Awesome. Thank you, Fafer. Moving on now down further southwards, we
Well,
get to.
hold on one second. I just want to go back just a little bit here. How many people down there have been showing up for these fights on both sides? I think what I heard on Friday night is it's something about it's been in the realm of 2,000 total. Tie dye has been manageable, meaning that it's functioning properly, even though it's a tie dye situation.
You're right, Dirk. Tie-dye is manageable because we don't put supers and the titans and the other things into onto the grid and in the system, and it's almost manageable. You can load the fighters in the tubes of carrier, and you can relaunch them. Of course, it's about a good measure. We have very good theory crafters on our side, both Russians like Carrer and Manfred Sidious representing US time zone, and we know about how many people we should be bringing, and I think we nailed this correct number in order to be able to play, but not to crash the system totally.
Also, not to extend this topic even more, but what are your thoughts on fraternity? Because they're someone I've had a real tough time trying to like get a hold of and get a grips of. How are they impacting this war, do you think?
Yeah, well, fraternity, they are looking their Lebensraum. They want a space to live, and they were given initial space by Triumvirate because Triumvirate needed an ally. And they have been good allies, and I can say that fraternity people are very lovely. They don't speak dirt in the local. They come and they fight. They don't blue ball much, and they are very brave. They drop dreads, and they have really good success against solar supers. And I think that everybody should love them at this point and show some love, because then we will have more Chinese players coming from Serenity. Although when their numbers will start to grow, more people will probably change the opinion, because at that point they will be like everybody else, doing Eve, and we know what that means.
Awesome.
But
Thank you
for now,
for
yeah.
Yeah, say thanks for coming on, Fafer. We know that you don't have a huge amount of time to stay with us, but thanks for coming on and kind of giving us the crash course at the current state of the Eastern conflict. We really appreciate it, and well, obviously, I love having you on whenever you have the time. So thank you for
Okay.
that.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
And yeah,
Take care,
that comes out Monday in U.S. time zone. So that'll be an interesting situation out there.
Ooh, US
So-
this time.
Moving further south around the map, going clockwise, we end up towards the wonderful region of Providence, where myself and Jin Tan from the current panel are staged. Anyone else here staged down there at the moment? No? Okay, fair enough.
We
So
roam
we've
there a
had
lot.
roams are fun. We have the continued conflict where PL is somewhat invading Providence for a bit of fun, or for whatever reason PL have decided. And then the defense mounted by Providence has been assisted by Tappy Test Alliance, and also with the occasional goon third party has been coming in as well. And then you also have obviously the Snuffbox Dreads on standby the moment anyone steps out of line, staged behind us. So there was actually an interesting article that came out on Imperium News. I'm not sure how many days ago it was. It had an interview with yourself, Jintan, and it positioned the perspective of the war as everybody was expecting, including PL, to come in and kind of have the region by now, and they're kind of pushing the story that Provi has been doing this amazing defense, and PL are weak and not as good as they think they are. What is your perspective, Jintan, on kind of how PL and Provi have both performed? I remember the article you said that PL has really kicked it into gear recently.
Yeah. I'm not. I don't think I'd ever try and spin the narrative of like PL as a worse alliance than
No,
CBA
I'm saying
or something like
that's
that.
what the article pushed, not what you pushed.
Yeah. Like I say in there, I think the reason why PL hasn't taken much more of our stuff right now is because it's not beneficial to their kind of current goal, which is getting as many fights as possible so that they can burn us out. That seems to be the overriding MO for PL right now.
Yeah.
So we're doing well. It's not like we haven't had our victories, but to say that we're uncompromisingly winning or that PL is falling at the first hurdle would be kind of stupid.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed just kind of as a line member of Pandemic Legion is that we're kind of having these really cool small skirmish over in Tosis timers that I'm personally quite enjoying. But then also the citadels, the engineering complexes, structures like that are forming kind of the bigger fights where you see the MJD Ravens or you see the capitals come out. So you've got this nice difference in scale and in types of conflict, even with these same groups attacking. And obviously, when the timers get bigger and bigger, that's when NC Dot tends to show up a bit more. That's when Test kind of preps a bit more. When various groups kind of see the big timers coming up, they bring the third parties in. Kind of, how have you been enjoying the kind of the different scale, and what bit do you most enjoy getting involved with?
I think the thing that I found the most fun is actually like getting to deploy capitals en masse with Provi. Like that's something we've not done for a fairly long time because Provi's always struggled with it. We need someone to kind of like force us to use them. We saw this in the Tri invasion. Like if I just ping for a carrier fleet, we're not at war, I'm gonna get like 10 people. If people feel like it's to defend their homes, last weekend we had 100 people in our cap fleet. They weren't all in caps, but that's a damn good start for us.
Yeah, and I think
So I'm
that
really enjoying that.
had PL moved their entire super capital force down from the north, then obviously this would be somewhat different with a super capital umbrella underway. But as things stand
The
now,
fight would already be over. Like
yeah,
if PL brings their super fleet down, that's game. Like they've already brought in a couple of supers. They were gate camping at one of Provi's gates with an avatar earlier today.
oh
If I
my
remember,
god,
like as much we're never gonna be able to on our own kind of compete with that level of super firepower. That's just not where we're at this point in the game. I don't think we'll ever get there, to be perfectly honest, unless we have a massive change of culture.
I mean, one of the
But
things you mentioned is that kind of a lot of the FCs are coming online and you're training a bunch of new people, and people in your group are becoming more martial focused. As you mentioned, your capital group has been going, fleet participation is going really well. In terms of your predictions for the long term of this conflict, are you still of the opinion that it's kind of a foregone conclusion and Providence will eventually be evicted and that's game? Or is this now a thing where it might be a stalemate or it might progress so slowly that there may be a larger conflict that PL have to go deal with and then Providence gets left behind? What do you think the potential end games are here for this conflict?
it really depends on like how the political shakeup, the political aspects of the game really play out. Like right now, we're relying pretty heavily, if I'm honest, on tests. And I kind of talk about that in the interview, where I'm like, we need test supers and caps because otherwise we can't out escalate PL and we just lose because if we bring the same amount of caps to the field as PL does, PL's probably going to win that fight. That's just a matter of course. If Test gets busy somewhere else, or they suddenly stop liking us, or goons invade them, or anything like that, that's just going to be that's going to be fairly bad for us. But other than that, I don't think the end point of the conflict is as clear as it was in the past, but it generally just depends on what you see victory as. If you think victory is winning a bunch of fights, then PL's probably going to win long term because they've already gotten a lot of fights that they've won.
What is the relationship between Provi and Tappy at the moment? Obviously, they've come and helped you guys out, but obviously, there's a ton of excrement posting on Reddit to do with they're not supporting each other, or wait, they're best friends now, or Tester's a secret goon ploy. Like, what is the actual truth of the Provi Tappy relationship?
Test just doesn't really want PL to kill us, so they're willing to help kill PL. I don't think there's anything more deep than that. We will send some dudes to help out Test when we can, and they'll send dudes to help us when they can. It's just a matter of, are we doing other shit?
Yeah. What are the other test conflicts that Provi have been sending dudes to help out with at the moment?
Mostly just other PL poking structures up there. That's really quietened down though recently. That or they've stopped sending me the timers, one of the two. Our US time zone is also one of the weaker aspects of the alliance. So with Test setting a lot of their stuff for US time zone, it really hampers our ability to help each other because we're predominantly EU focused.
Yeah. Now, I would love to kind of talk about this for a long time because it's actually something I've been involved with. Not only because of that, but it's been a really fun conflict in kind of testing lots of different aspects of Citadel warfare and in TOSES warfare without putting 6,000 dudes into a single system, so the servers kind of creak and groan under the strain as we saw up in 9 Tech 4.
I'm
However,
coming to the timer later today. Just really quick.
I can neither confirm nor deny PL's commitment or uncommitment to any given timer in any particular time or space.
Well, we're gonna be there. I'll see you there, mate.
See you there, buddy. Right, we do have to move further. Now, I believe technically on the map that wormhole space is in the far southeast, if I remember correctly, like in terms of what the map actually looks like. But we have our wonderful wormhole correspondent, Kaskora, who's been waiting patiently to talk about all of the J space goodness. It came out that I believe it's January of 2018 is the most active month in wormhole space since all the way back in 2015. So, Castor, do you want to give us kind of like a brief overview of what's been going on in wormholes in January and possibly kind of the lead up politically and activity wise throughout the last year and what's caused this month to be so crazy? Whether it's kind of just like a peak point of like suddenly everything that had been building has come together at once and now it's going to quieten down again, or whether this is going to be the new normal in wormhole space and just more and more people are flooding in to place spaceships there.
Well, I like to think that it's hopefully going to be the new norm. But with wormholes, we don't exactly have these kind of like massive activity points that kind of kick off big things. It's more kind of like a slow, inherent, kind of gradual burn. But January is usually Wormhole's most active month to begin with. And we've just been seeing there's a lot of really big groups in wormholes right now, and they're all really active. And so it's just creating a lot of activity. Oh my God, I'm sorry. My dog is going crazy.
We're EVE Online players. We're used to having like FCs be co-FC'd by dogs and stuff. What's the famous?
He agrees with me. He's
Yeah.
very adamantly agreeing about all of this activity in wormholes. But you know the big dip in 2015 happened back in the day because of the jump mass changes. That was like one of the big catalysts for kind of some activity falling off. Was that people used to be able to jump through a wormhole, and no matter what ship you were in, you'd land at 0 on the other side. And they changed it, so now the bigger ships will land farther off of the wormhole, and that caused a lot of the people that would bear or crab in the high class wormholes, because they would close off all the connections to stay safe by throwing capitals through them and jumping back and collapsing the hole. But they couldn't really do that anymore because now there's a safety concern. So a lot of groups ended up kind of dialing down their bearing activity, which in the end gave less targets for the PvPers to attack, and it kind of drifted down a little bit. But now with citadels and refineries and everything like that, and especially with the new mining changes and the new Moongoo additions to wormhole space, I'm hoping that this is more just entry points for wormholes for people who might not have tried them out before.
One thing I wanted to ask somebody wormhole knowledgeable for a time, so I'm going to take advantage while we have you here, is that obviously we saw in 9TAC 4 kind of big keep star battles with the 6,000 dudes in system. Now, structure warfare and wormhole space is obviously going to be very, very different, and a lot of the changes and the fixes being posed, such as not having carriers tethered, and then be able to throw out fighters, is something that's been coming up for K-Space. So in J-Space, what is the meta, as it were, for the larger scale, bigger groups taking down each other's larger structures? Kind of what kind of ships, what kind of doctrines, what kind of tactics are we looking at?
Well, we actually have had a Keepstar Bash in wormholes. There were a total of 4 Keepstars in wormhole space, and one of them is no more. And the real way that that happened is it was a very long siege process. But basically, what happened is people from Hard Knocks and Laserhawks, which are the 2 main aggressing groups, they just would find connections to that wormhole and throw capital ships in and log them out. Because you can only fit 3 capitals through a high class wormhole before it collapses due to mass. So they would bring in 3, log them out, then find a new connection, bring in 3 more, log them out. And at the time, once they got enough force, they were able to really overpower whoever was living there, which was Inner Hell, was the corp that lost the wormhole or lost the Keepstar. And so by the time they hit, they had like 150 capitals seated in, and the defenders didn't know this because they didn't see them logging in and didn't have a defense fleet big enough to support them. And once your fleet is big enough and you're in a wormhole, if you can lock all the exits down, then that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and then one of these stats that came out is that C2 class wormholes have the most number of kills, and C5 class wormholes had the highest value of ISK going on down there. What is so? So to my knowledge, kind of C1 through 4 is considered low class, maybe C1 through 3, and then C4, C5, and above are high class in inverted comma wormholes. What is the kind of flavor of C1 through C6 that maybe case spacers should think of when thinking about kind of the class of wormholes, and kind of how does that feed into why C2 has the highest number of kills compared to the most value of kills in C5?
Well, so you say low class and high class. I made a big silly meme in my first talk at eVegas by saying that C4s were middle class space, and I still, I have to kind of support
The
that.
vanishing middle class of modern EVE Online.
But basically, the way that the different classes work is that C1, 2, and 3 all have case-based statics. And so for those who are like really not familiar with wormholes, every wormhole will always have a connection to some type of space. So that way you can never be completely locked into a wormhole. So the lower class wormholes, 1, 2, 3, all have guaranteed case-based connections. And C4 has 2 statics, but they both go to wormhole space. And C5 and 6 only have 1, but it also is guaranteed to be wormhole space. Now, the reason they call it high class space is that 5 and 6 can fit capitals through their connections, whereas 1, 2, 3, and 4 cannot. The biggest class of ship you could fit is a battleship, and those actually won't even fit into C1 space either. So when this breaks down, most people who live in wormhole space tend to favor the high class holes, with a collection of us like myself being in C4s. And there's some that live in C2s as well for ease of case-based connections. But the big PvPers for the most part live in 5 space, because then they can roll into other 5 wormhole groups and have those big fights that we like so much. But so that's where the higher ISK value comes in. People in C5s can fit capitals through. They fly more blingy T3 cruisers, and they have big fights that lose a lot of ISK. But C2 space have a 50% chance, I believe, of having a high sec connection is their static. So you have groups like Wingspan or other roaming groups that all they do is just scan down wormholes in K-space, jump in, and gank whatever's in there. And because they have that high state connection and they have a second static that leads upwards into wormhole space, they're a big transportation kind of logistics hub. So then you get people moving through them really frequently, and that results in a lot of ganks and small skirmishes and battles to kill whoever's moving around in the wormholes. And C2s are also just a good entry point system. They're where a lot of people start into wormholes. So there's just a lot of people in them too, though maybe not very expensive stuff.
It's also a matter of where the value.
Go ahead, Ashrothi.
Yeah, it's a matter of where the value is, right? So one of the keys about wormholes is that all wormholes are nullsec. So that means that all wormholes have really good PI and other resources like that. And additionally, C1 through C3 also have nullsec exploration sites in them, which is really good money. So basically,
we lost you, buddy.
Income, it's there for them in those low C, and probably is going to be less competitive for them. Meanwhile, in the higher C, you're looking for people who are, actually running the anomalies and the capital escalations and all that stuff. So you're seeing heavier equipment, more money being tossed around, and therefore more expensive explosions.
We have a bunch of people in chat being very, very angry at us. It may be at calling all wormholes nullsec space, which is probably one of the most offensive things you could say. Kaskora might be able to confirm or deny. What do you think, Kaskora?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all null security. Regardless of what you want to think about it, it's all -1 true sec. and
No, you're
therefore that affects the.
that is the accurate part, but we are not null secers in that kind of sense. But yes, every wormhole space have really good resources for the most part, and the C123s do have good access to make ISK for smaller groups or for solo people, and that's great. But I mean, the real ISK is in 5 and 6 space because the combat anomalies are able to be run pretty much solo. You know, have the drifters in there as well. And that's really where the big money is. Also, the gas mining. I mean, gas mining is a huge asset for ISK, and you don't get the good ISK in the low classes. So it's really, it really just depends. I mean, we started in a C2 and we got a lot of good use out of it while we grew, and then we moved up. And it's really just kind of what you make of it. And that's what I like about wormholes. You can really do whatever you want in it. And there's lots of potential for all kinds of stuff in there. But it's nice that we're getting more people, especially with Citadels. Passes were such a pain in the ass. So now that we have a little bit more security with assets, and we have more potential with refining, and we can package ships better and all kinds of stuff, it's just been a lot better. And I'm really hoping that that this trend of higher activity is continuing on. But I do want to just give a quick call out, though. The graphs that have been kind of showing on the screen are from Exuki Z. He's the CEO of the Dark Space Initiative, or TDSIN, with Scary Wormhole People. He did a podcast called Game of Holes on Friday that went like a super deep dive into these stats, breaking down like the big battles that happen month by month, which are big for us. Maybe not big. They're not nearly as big as like the scale of nullsec, but there's a lot of activity going on, and I really hope that that's going to continue on.
And then if you were to stare into your crystal wormhole ball, what are you kind of expecting to see in the future in terms of combat? Are there any specific conflicts or political pieces we should be looking for? How do you think the moon mining be allowed into wormholes? Like, kind of, what is your personal prediction for what you think the future of wormholes is going to look like over the next couple of months through the rest of 2018, both kind of on a political scale and on what the ecosystem is going to look like?
Now, wormhole politics, that is a complicated ball of wax right there.
That's a great saying. A complicated ball of wax. I've never heard that one before.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of mix because the big groups in wormholes, basically, like, we are big because of our ability to PvP, and so then it complicates things because we only have one system each, pretty much. I mean, people have crab holes and bear holes that are off for people to just kind of make solo money in, but we really all have one home system, and that's the one that we all really care about. So we're not looking to expand in that way. We're not looking to gain territory or any of that kind of stuff. We're in wormholes, and we are successful in wormholes by our ability to fight other wormholers. And so that leads to a whole level of competition that has a different kind of wavelength than a lot of other parts of Eve. But there definitely are politics and groups butt heads. The biggest one right now that we're starting to kind of see up again is that back in the day of wormholes, the Russians were pretty much all allied for a while, and they took out a lot of C6 space. They killed all the big entities in there, and we're starting to see the Russian groups kind of coming back and working together again. And that could lead to a lot of big conflicts in the high class space. So it'll be interesting to see how it all kind of filters out, because all the big groups are probably going to get involved at some point. So we'll have to see how. I'll be very interested to see how it shakes down. But more people to kill and more fights is always a good thing in wormholes. So
I have a question. Can you speak to what sort of influence the shattered wormholes are having on the overall wormhole lifestyle?
honestly, not much. They're great to find a lot of connections. Every shattered wormhole is always going to have a ton of sites, a ton of connections, and that's good for logistic purposes. But it's always just kind of like oh, hey, there's a shattered hole, cool. What can we do with it? And then it kind of goes away. Same with frigate holes. I mean, frigate holes are also one of the things that was added in the same expansion, and there's some that are frigate only. You can only get into them by way of frigates, and that's cool for like some lower skill point guys to make some money, and that's nice, and they can be a transport way. But it's really not it really didn't do much to change anything in wormhole space as far as like way of life.
I was always curious because it seemed like a way of granting access to ice products to wormholers without leaving their space. But it sounds to me like it hasn't really been as successful for that as it should have been.
Yeah, I mean, we have done some ice mining, but pretty much there's so many other ways to make ISK in wormholes that it's easier and more time saving to just import the ice. Because it's not, I mean, once you're in a frigate hole, you can only take frigates in there, so you can't haul out large quantities, and it's just kind of logistically annoying. I mean, it's nice. It was a nice addition. Some people who are industrialists, I'm sure, use it a lot more, but for a big group like mine, it's just not really worth it.
Now, there was a question from the audience. Carthage Chief was asking, are all the C6 holes still owned or controlled by Hard Knocks?
Not just Hard Knocks. They do own a lot, but other entities have C6s
Hard
as
Knocks
well.
and Laserhawks?
There's other groups too. I think Shuckle Squad's another pretty big group, and they've got some C6s. Some people have like solo C6s just for whatever. I mean, you can make a lot of ISK in C6s, so some people will set them up as bear holes, but no one really lives in C6s. They're all just basically ways to make ISK. And so who owns them is almost kind of inconsequential at this point, though the Russians traditionally always set up in C6 space. And so I think that could lead to some more conflict in C6s again. It used to be everyone lived in C6 space. That was like the old glory days of wormholes. But why not live in C6 space? Someone's asking. Well, part of the thing with C6s is that there's very few of them. There's only like 120 or something C6s, where there's like 300 to 500 of each other class of wormhole. So when people all lived in C6 space, they could reliably connect to other C6s much more easily than if you lived in C5 space, because the chances of rolling in were so much smaller with less C6s to chance. But it also means you can get evicted more easily because people can roll into your hole and seat in a big fleet very easily too.
Isn't it also just guaranteed to
No,
get fired?
Okay, so does any of the rest of the panel have any wormhole questions before we move on to the next of our many, many topics?
I'll go ahead and do a little shout out. Exuki, the guy that did my all the stats and everything for this, he's running for CSM. So get some wormhole represent in the CSM. They're always good. Just throwing that out there.
Well, I was going to ask two questions there. Number one, do you have a link to that podcast that got recorded? And I believe that he
Yes.
also runs that podcast. And then if you can throw that out into the Twitch chat, I know somebody out there was asking for it. And then, okay, so he's running for that. Do we know if Noobman is running? How does the wormhole community feel about Noobman's representation of the wormhole side of the equation on the CSM?
Newman is not running again. I think that pretty much everybody in Wormholes has been very happy with him and his time as a CSM. I know him personally quite well, and he has put a lot of time and effort into his role as a CSM, and he's done a good job. For at least I think so, a really good job of making sure that our concerns are heard and that we get a place at the table in those big discussions. The person that's kind of replacing him as far as who's running in that area is Fodes Latro. I also know him personally very well, and he's also a great guy, and I think he's going to do a great job too. If we can get 2 Wormhole CSM members, I would love that so much. Exuki and Fodes are both great candidates, and I like them both a lot. I'd love to see them both make it to the CSM.
Are wormholers like able to organize enough to be able to? How do I put this? Not are they able to organize enough, because I think that they have shown that in the past, probably better than anybody outside of nullsec. But
do we have enough people to get them both in?
Well, are they organized? Do you think again this year to be able to say, look, if we want representation, we are going to have to organize. We can't just be throwing up multiple names and splitting votes.
Well, I mean, you can vote for multiple people, which is nice. So I think every wormholer is going to be voting for both. I would hope so. Both of those candidates are in high class space. Fotis' Hard Knocks, Exuki's Scary Wormhole People. Both of them are well respected in the wormhole community. They both go to a lot of the meetups, so a lot of people have met them in real life. They're both great guys. I would be happy with either, and I would love it if both would win. And I hope that everybody in the wormhole community would vote for both of them too. And maybe, since they have been to those meetups, and Exuki's done the FanFest wormhole presentation for the last like 4 years in a row or something, so they're both pretty visible. I think they're both great candidates, and I would love to see them both win. And I hope that we all have enough support to back them up. I know I'm going to be doing what I can to spread their names, as evidenced here.
Awesome. I think what we need to do is have Matterall set up like a full wormhole talking stations regular thing where every however many weeks we have like just a bunch of different people in wormhole space, because this is all super interesting stuff and really, really hard to penetrate, despite it being such a kind of a big political sphere that we hear about. So a lot of like we need a Jin Tan and Ashtarothi of wormhole space that just make videos and podcasting content about wormhole space that the rest of us can approach understanding. Still,
And if I know anything about you, Apophany, you just love penetrating spheres. That's all you're about.
I mean, it's all about. It doesn't even have to be a sphere. Just objects. Just yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
part of why I'm here, and like what I also do the wormhole talk at Vegas every year now. I've done it for 2 years in a row, and I hope to do it again this year. Is just to kind of spread the word about wormholes. I mean, we're a really fun part of this game. I mean, I've been in wormholes for 4 years. It's actually my Eve birthday as of Friday. 4 years in the game, and I've been in wormholes for almost that entire time. I joined with like 2 million SP, and
spreading the
I would
good
have
word
it.
of Bob.
Exactly. I mean, I would have it no other way. I love it. And I just hope that, we're a small group, but we're all very active. We're all very committed and devoted to this game. And so I hope that just by being here on a weekly basis, I can just kind of open up this whole world of the game to everyone else so they can see just, a little window into our lifestyle and how much we enjoy it. And we can talk about Eve together.
Yeah, don't
So,
stop talking about it because we're obviously interested in hearing it.
yeah, the only reason I'm cutting you off is because we are like not even halfway through the notes and we're 2/3 of the way through the show.
Oh, of course.
So
I can talk about wormholes all day.
the next thing to move on to is the assault frigate heavy assault cruiser balancing path that's coming through. My kind of initial read of it is that a lot of the assault frigate stuff looks like they've been trying out different things with different hulls, trying to balance them around, moving slots around, changing guns around, like all that kind of stuff. For example, we know that one of the Mimitar assault frigates, I forget which one because I'm an idiot, is actually changing to missiles. I don't think we've had an official dev blog on it yet, but they're out on
Jaguar will.
Sissy. Sorry?
There's a post on the forums.
Jag, right?
Oh yeah. There's a post about the module, but have we had one on the specifics of the hulls?
Yes.
A couple of
I believe
yeah.
we have.
Oh, I entirely missed that. I'll have to read that. But
Okay.
then my surface reading is that did they include any hack changes in that? Because what I've been hearing from people is basically that the assault frigates look like they're getting a lot of interesting changes. They've been thought about well, and hacks are kind of still hacks as they are, but with the assault damage control. Is
Well,
that roughly accurate?
I'm pulling it up right now, so I'll be able to correct it.
If you could
But
link it in backstage, that would be really helpful.
awesome. My take of it when I read it was more like the blog was like, hey, just to remind you guys, these are the damage controls that we're coming out with, and this is how they work. And along with that, here's a couple of the changes that we're looking to do alongside that with the assault ships. I did not get the impression that the list of changes that were made was a complete list.
Okay, so basically what has been announced and what is going to be coming out is an assault frigate rebalance, okay, along with this assault damage control. The only way that hacks come into that is that they will be able to use the assault damage control. But this is mainly focused on assault frigates, that all of them are getting certain buffs like 18% max velocity increase, 10% mass reduction, and a 30% increase to capacitor capacity. There are then also some changes to 3 other particular ships. The Ishkur, the Retribution, and the Jaguar. The Jaguar was the one that you were referencing was moving from guns to missiles.
Yeah, I
There's
now
also-
actually do remember reading this. He does finish with "that's all for now," implying that this may expand and continue to the other assault frigates, and hopefully the hacks in terms of specific rebalances and touch-ups and tweaks. Obviously, not all ships need the extreme treatment of switching from projectiles to missiles, but hopefully we'll get just some little tweaks across the board, both on assault frigates and heavy assault cruisers. Though obviously in the February balance update, it says assault frigates and assault damage controls and does not specify heavy assault cruisers.
Correct. It feels less that there isn't going to be hack changes and more just we haven't gotten that particular blog yet.
Yeah, it might be that they might even do AFs first, and then as the next pass after that in weeks or months, then the hack changes will come through, depending on how much time CCP Rise can fit into his schedule. It's slightly alluding to Jintan's recent
It's
article.
not.
I'm not touching it. I've already had fucking Reddit call me literally retarded because I suggested that maybe CCP has considerations about why they might do things related to balance that
Madness.
you aren't aware of. Like,
If you try to rush too much, you can make mistakes on that stuff too. So if he needs the time to do it right, let him have the time.
yeah, it'd be nice if members of CCP's management would do that potentially.
But I mean, look, just because we were getting a rebalance on assault frigates doesn't mean that it also required right now on hacks. We all know that hacks need it, right? They continue to run that problem with their issue with Tech 3 cruisers and things like that out there. But I mean, for now, let's just focus on the assault frigates. What do you guys think about these changes in terms of basically making them faster, and then we can get into individual ships that are being changed. But overall, do these changes, like increases to velocity and capacitor, help them out, coupled with the assault damage control?
Yeah, so I mean, the thing I'd say about that is that assault frigates and heavy assault cruisers are a class of ship that fall, because they haven't been touched for so long, that fall into kind of a weird space in terms of how you fit them, in that there are many ships in EVE Online that you can just throw whatever modules the hell you want on them, and you have all the fitting. So, for example, if you look at the Cerberus, especially if you're doing rapid light fits, you can basically put whatever the hell you want on the rest of it, and you're good, you're fine, you're happy. The same way with the old Cinnable before that was rebalanced, you could kind of just throw big, large guns and double LSE and not need any fitting mods. And I think that the problem with a lot of the heavy assault cruisers and the assault frigates is that because they were designed so long ago, that their requirements on cap, the requirements on CPU, the requirements on power grid kind of were still in a place where you balanced around that, and certain ships couldn't do certain things. Like, for example, if you want to fit 250 millimeter rails on a Deimos, that's about all you're going to do with it, unless you have a whole bunch of fitting mods. In terms of how they fit into the meta, we haven't seen hacks really in quite a long time, though largely because they were kind of outperformed by the Tech 3 cruisers, which recently got a nerf. Kind of the most recent hack stuff going on. We can't even remember. Kind of zealots used to be a thing a while ago, and kind of in small Roman gangs, Ishtars
Serbs.
famously. Serbs are still a thing, but I hate them personally. Serbs are just kind of like, I hate double optimal bonuses on any ships. But then in the assault frigate space, Harpy Fleet was a very big thing for a very long time, and I assume still, at least before the rebalance, is a thing that can be done. But kind of like Jackdaws have kind of taken over to some extent in that role. Jin, as another kind of nullsec FC, well, definitely much more nullsec FC than I am. Kind of how have the hacks and AFs fitted into kind of your considerations, your meta building on the larger alliance scale? Then after you, if Ashtarothi, if I can ask you about how it fits into the faction warfare, which is typically a much smaller scale of combat.
In the terms of like large scale theory crafting, hacks are pretty much useless right now. Like, you can use the Serb, but the Loki is actually, I found, to be quite a decent counter for it. I know Muck's been having some great success with that. The Serb's actually kind of one of our workhorses right now in terms of small gang T-Loss. I've been using them a lot against Hired and Everest, which I think is the interesting part. Like, so much of warfare now isn't about these pitch battles. It's about the little skirmishy fights that happen between them. That I feel like when we talk about nullsec doctrines now, we're kind of ignoring that part of the game, which is equally integral to how nullsec functions right now.
Yeah.
As far as faction warfare goes, I think I'm not really going to talk too much about the hack situation for a couple of reasons. One, because we haven't gotten all the details yet. But more importantly, hacks are T2 cruisers. So then they only are really applicable in mediums, and you just don't really see it that much. But assault frigates are actually kind of interesting. Hold on. So what ends up happening there is, hold. Am I cutting out?
No, you're
Not
fine.
yet. Unless
Sorry. Sorry, I'm back. So the assault frigates end up becoming what I kind of like bunker busters, right? So if somebody's inside of a plex, the biggest problem is that they have this really good advantage. They can be at their optimal. They know you're coming in and all that stuff. So this really good tank for a short period of time, I can see that being used as like, well, there's a bunch of destroyers inside of a small. We've got a few assault frigates. Let's go in there and try to bust it up. So I think that it will create kind of some change in the dynamics of smalls a bit. And I really think that that's where CCP is hoping to leverage the advantage of some of these things the most.
Yeah. Kaskora, what are your thoughts on the changes, how assault frigates will affect wormhole space? You mentioned that the frigate-only wormholes aren't really so much of a thing, where assault frigates might have had a good use. Like, is this going to add any considerations into doctrines or flying spaceships there, or like what's the deal with AFs and hacks in wormhole space?
Well, with assault frigates, I mean, there might be some use. We actually all pretty much have to have a small mass doctrine in our collection for when we run into verge of collapse holes, or we do have we have to get somewhere, and the only way to get there is through a frigate hole. We all tend to use the T3 destroyers for that right now. That's pretty much our bread and butter. So I'm not sure. We'll have to see. I mean, people I'm sure will do some doctrine testing and see if it works out, but I'm not sure there'll be enough of a force multiplier to compete with the T3 destroyer meta that's so prevalent in wormholes right now. As far as hacks, we haven't seen a lot of hacks in wormholes in a really, really long time. Like since back in the day when Ishtars were super overpowered. T3 cruisers are our standard go-to for our heavy fights. The hacks are great for people with lower skill points if they don't have enough to really do T3s, but I don't know. We'll have to see. There were some old doctrines that maybe people would try to revitalize and see if those can be relevant again. But our styles of doctrines are so focused on cruisers and command ships right now that I'm not sure if hacks will find a place. They might for smaller groups, small lower SP groups, but for the big top PvPers, I'm not sure we'll see much from them. It'll be interesting to see though.
Cool. So there. Sorry, Ashtarothi, go ahead.
I just wanted to chime back in and say that the one place that I think that we actually might end up with a bit of a problem potentially is sniper harpies. And the reason why is because we're still using them. They're very effective right now for what we need when it comes to like countering Corms and other destroyers in Plexus and whatnot. And the advantages that they're getting, extra speed, this burst tank, etc., is basically exactly what they need to do their job better. And they already do their job pretty good. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on them to make sure that these changes don't push them too far off the edge.
It may be the case that in the further tweaks that harpies even get down tuned in order to balance for that. One might hope if
That would be
there's any
really
attention.
that'd be really unfortunate though, because like the sniper harpy style is an incredibly useful tool and a really good in like the give and take balanced nature of like deciding how we're going to fight in Plexus, for example. It's important to that sniper counter, which is important when people like go 100 off and just kind of monitor
Yeah,
you or try to pick people off.
I don't mean in terms of nerf bat them into the ground, just that if they anticipate the bonuses of the velocity, the cap, the new damage control coming in, pushing harpies as they're already in a pretty good place into so much a higher place that they can, maybe cut a little off, maybe they shave off a few bits here and there. So they still do the same thing, they just aren't quite as incredibly powerful and get pushed into that crazy zone, if you
Correct.
see what I mean.
Right.
But then,
My problem is that when it comes to these armor things, the damage controls in particular, when you're looking at sniper doctrines, it even becomes more effective, right? Because you can pop that damage control and just go away. It's not like a brawling situation where you're committed and all that sort of stuff. These damage controls can really be the difference between living or dying.
yeah. So McLeod actually brings up an interesting point that I hadn't thought of. Is that if you have, say, an ASB Hawk, for example, you run your ASB out, activate your damage control whilst the ASB is reloading, try and survive through buffer for that, and then you get to ASB again. And the whilst your ASB is running, you let your assault damage control run down. I don't know how the timings work for that, but that's a cool idea. Anyway, one very last small point, because I'm hosting, I get to put this in. We're going to talk about tournament stuff. Damn it! Basically, how this is going to work in tourney stuff is in terms of hacks, kind of met. Personally, I am assuming that the assault damage control is just going to be a not allowed module in the tournament. The main issue with assault frigates and tackle stuff is that historically, Tick 3 destroyers have done that job but better because of defensive mode, what have you. But currently, depending on what the new points are, they're 2 points less. So assault frigates might come back in as something that can push away from the group, tackle a kiter, hold it down for longer. Because one of the big things in tournament play is, especially at the beginning match, you might bum rush the opposing logistics to hold it down with something so your big ships can apply damage to it. The assault damage control basically gives that ability to not just get volleyed by, 2 Orthruses and a Serb as the anti-tackle. So instead, if this does exist in tournament space, I'm expecting the war of tackle to become a lot more difficult and much more reliant on E-War, both in terms of damps, jams, and screening by tackling the tackle away, than just knowing that you can blow up an Enyo when it's out of rep range in X amount of time before it scram webs your logistics cruiser.
But don't you expect them to exclude that damage control from tournament play?
Yeah,
Why? Why would?
Oh no, I don't think so at all. I think that given the smaller number of the controlled nature of the competition means that it's very easy for you to determine a countermeasure, right? Because one jam cycle effectively removes the effectiveness of the damage control.
Well, I don't think it's a guarantee that it's going to be banned. I think it is a module that is on the list of things you would consider banning. For example, the jump generator things on Command Destroyers, obvious ban. I'd say that the assault damage control is something that Fozzie and Rise are going to be looking at very hard, especially if they allow it at all in the beginning. They will be looking at it to absolutely make sure that it just doesn't ruin the meta. And then when it comes into hacks, even if hacks have this module, I think that the problem with the tournament meta in general at the moment is that just battle cruisers are A, amazing, and B, super mega cheap. So unless there are big battle cruiser changes into the points system, until next year, it's going to be a lot of battle cruisers again, which are going to take the place of hacks as kind of your somewhat more heavy damage platform. Yeah, I think that's the case. And like in Tranquility, we see Tech 1 battle cruisers being kind of a big mainstay in fleet combat in the same way they are especially good in tournament settings for similar reasons. Anyway,
You
that's
don't
probably
think?
will be a time
Hold on.
I'm allowed for tournament stuff.
Here's my question though: do you think that we're going to see a strong resurgence of Mimitar Rush?
No, Mini Rush loses pretty hard to BC Spam. Because
you think in spite of the extra speed, the damage controls, and everything else, the Mimitar hack can't get in there?
So like basically the problem is so like the Sleipnir was the king of the battle cruiser slot, right, in tournament play, just forever. It's the most amazing thing ever. But the Sleipnir lives on its active tank. The active tank is the important thing, right? So it's the ASB and it's have T2 simi reps going on it. The problem with battle cruisers is that they just have so much raw HP and outcut huge damage to big ranges that the battle cruisers are just kind of beating sleps in that they have enough damage to really pressure the tank early on and kind of destroy that part of the meta. And also they can just kind of shoot and kill logistics from the start if they want to. So that active tank, relying on an active tank, is much less powerful having T2 resist than just slapping a huge wad of EHP on the field and going, fine, you can spend a minute killing this ship whilst I have enough DPS and enough range to kill the rest of your team if you go for high resist tank rather than high HP tank. That's a very large oversimplification, but it's kind of the reason.
I think it's pretty safe to say that Apothony is addicted to the tournaments.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's roll off the tournament.
Yes, Carnoris, please tell us about the MER.
Well, hold on one second. I just want to sum up this whole
I
thing.
tried. Dirk, stop me.
No. I'm not going into the 12 people who play in the Alliance tournament. I'm talking about assault frigates, which have been a constant redheaded stepchild even before T3Ds, and then were made even worse being left behind. Do we think anything here has changed, whether or not people are going to use Tech 3 destroyers and switch over to assault frigates, and then on what scale? I mean, is it big fleet stuff? Solo guys out there? Are assault frigates now going to be better because of this change and make you have to choose to not use Feeples?
We'll leave it at
I
that
think
question.
testing. People will test it. Sorry.
Yeah, try it out. The meta has not yet determined.
Maybe if you want to see more balance in the game, you should go and, show that after ships are rebalanced, people take a look at them and try and use them in space. That might incentivize CCP to do more balance.
Well, I'm trying to ask the people here who know something about little tiny ships. So like you or Apothony.
Oh, I'm gonna have
do you think this changes anything?
I'm gonna use them in solo PvP, but I don't know if they'll actually be any good.
Yeah, we need a Suetonia on for that kind of thing. But still, we should move on. Carnaros, tell us about
Thank
the
you.
January MER.
Okay, so the new monthly economic report just came out this week for January. I love how it comes out so quickly. It's great fun. I'm not an industrialist, but I always look first for certain things when the new report comes out. Like a lot of people, I go look first at the mining value by region to see how Delve is doing compared to everyone else. It's always good for a giggle. And due to deployment and military activities out in the direction of, say, Fountain and Cloud Ring and the border there, mining dropped in Delve. I know I told my guys, hey, don't undock in a Rorqual unless you know what the hell you're doing and you're prepared, because there's no Theta squad there to protect you when they're all deployed. Anyway, so total mining by region. And Maestro McLeod, could I trouble you to put something up on visuals? We didn't quite break 10 bill for the month of January in Delve mining. Trill, sorry. Billion, trillion, yes, I know. Yeah, didn't quite break 10 trill, which I would consider a small dip.
It was a 30%. It was a 30% fall off from the month before.
But it looks like everyone else seems a little low too, right, Dirk?
Yeah, I mean, out of the 19 nullsec regions that I happen to track, I think it was 13 out of those 19, which were from all over. So it wasn't just centered on any surrounding area around Delve or Cloud Ring or anything like that. We're all down double-digit percentages in January. The biggest one, of course, was Delve, where they had other things going on. They had hunters down there, and they had defense fleets that were not in the area. But you had double-digit dips across a lot of different regions out there, including most of the big regions in terms of mining. The only one that was noticeably up, okay, that is also a more than 1 trillion a month mining region was Branch. Branch, they continued to chug right along.
Is any of that guts? Do you gut check here? Any of those other regions that went down, even if they're far away, would you ascribe that to being alts of people who did move over to the battle zone in the Cloud Ring area? No, you think it was other things?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, I mean, yeah, I really don't know. I don't have insight into why Cobalt Edge was down 16% or why, I don't know. Well, I know why Aquarius was. Why Kalevala, Expanse was down 15% this month.
One of the things that will be interesting statistics-wise in terms of seeing whether or not these changes are meaningful is if you look at the track of how the MAR changes over a year, 2 year, 3 years with monthly data points, you can then start to see what normal variance is month to month and what real variance is due to specific events. And then you kind of have to track that in with political changes and groups moving. But from a statistician's point of view, um, the more data points more consistently of the same data you have, the better. And your information only improves the longer you have that information coming in.
After the mining regions, and sometimes I'll look too at the industrial production and trade and kind of compare Delve and GDEV. But the most important slide on the group, in my opinion, is much farther down if you're scrolling down on the page right now. And it's the slide called money supply. This is probably EverQuest bias floating into my perception here. But I go and look at the money supply graph because I want to see how bad that angle is going toward the upper right. In an ideal world, it would be fairly flat, in my opinion, close to flat. And if you go look at the January report, it looks remarkably flat.
Yes. And it would be. I mean, you basically ended the month flat. In fact, it was down 1.5 trillion ISK overall, which is the aggregate, right, of a 5% increase in total faucets, a negative 1.3% decrease in total sinks. All right, but then 40 trillion ISK came out of the money supply due to active ISK delta. Now, active ISK delta, all right, takes into account basically the last 30 days of inactivity. So if your character was inactive for the last 30 days as of the time that they took their snapshot, right, they're not included in the money supply. All right, if they were, then they are. But it seems there's word out there. I think Noisy posted something at one point that it looks like there may have been a bot ban or something along those lines. Now, if accounts get banned, the money that's on those accounts also comes out of the money supply and is part of that activist delta. So negative 40 trillion basically offset the difference between sinks and faucets to make total money supply basically break even for the month.
And the reason we worry about the money supply growing too fast is because it can be a sign of or contributor towards what we call in the industry mudflation, where on MMOs, the value of the money starts to go down and the prices go up, and it can start a bad economic cycle that is difficult to live with years down the road.
It's kind of hard to look at money supply at this point. Again, that activist delta is so up and down nowadays based on the new way that they're calculating it because of the introduction of alphas and free accounts, right? They're going based on that activity metric. But when you look at just on a month-to-month basis, the net difference between faucets and sinks, the amount of ISK being generated into the game is always up. You're always looking at something in the realm of sinks as a percentage of faucets being somewhere in the 60 to 65% range. So there's always a net increase in ISK coming into the game. Money supply, though, is going to be all ISK that's out there that they happen to be counting based on activity of character, the character with the particular wallet.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of kind of, I want to ask you, in terms of kind of what you said about kind of you wanting to see that line be flat, why specifically do you want that line to be flat? Like, what's the thought behind that for people like me who don't know big economy game systems as well as perhaps you do in your line of work?
Well, I watch what has happened to the EverQuest economy over the years, and it's a little bit older than this game and a little bit more awkward and doesn't have quite as many tools. I mean, you guys think of EVE Online as being old. They're older ones, and the economies on the older games are worse. Eve has a remarkable economy for how old this game is, and uh, I wish I had some of the levers in EverQuest to adjust the money supply growth. I'm not saying bring it down, but I would adjust the growth to be less aggressive if I could, and that would give us more options for how to add additional content to the game. It's too much money flowing in makes the players become jaded by the amount that they earn from doing tasks, and you have to pump it up to get their attention. And yeah, it causes a cycle that gets more and more difficult to build around, to balance around.
Well, I mean, you've got the combination of money that's flowing in, right, as well as the resources that go into building things also flowing in. And the balance between those is in a lot of ways what's going to determine whether or not all that money flowing in, which you would think would have an effect on inflation, is indeed having an effect on inflation, right? And I don't think that in Eve we ever really see, really big high inflation sort of across the board. We may see inflation in various areas where CCP has made changes and has sort of changed the underlying equation of so like in the case of Tech 2 items, right? Because of the moon changes and everything, right? Tech 2 is just more expensive now.
So I'm going to throw out a prediction for the February monthly economic report.
Mining will be up.
Yeah. I think we'll hit 10 trillion again. I mean, I don't see there might be this could change if we end up doing a deployment, or I know of a few little things going on at the corporation level or the SIG level or this and that, but I don't know of anything big at the coalition level. That so who knows? That's going to have a big effect.
Well, massive thank you to Jintan and Fafer for guesting this week. As always, thank you for the panel for showing up. We all hope Matro feels better. We must talk about an upcoming Eve meet that is going to be happening on the 10th of February. It is the London Eve meet, which is run now by EveNT. Used to be called the old Veto meet. It is the longest standing running player meet. Sorry, thank you, Ashtarothi, as well. I forget because I'm just so used to seeing you on podcasts. You are a guest and you are wonderful, and we love having you here.
I'm
As we
ever
love
present.
having everyone here. You are
Always here, always close.
we want your internet connection to be fixed so you can be on more shows more often again. I, at the very least, miss you dearly. So yes, we have the old Veto meet, now EVNT meet, same place as always in London this Saturday. I think there's a Facebook group. There will be posts around all around the place. So definitely go to that. I usually try and go. Unfortunately, this year it is falling exactly on my father's 62nd birthday, so I will be spending the day with him instead.
So young.
Happy birthday to him for a week. And yeah, so any other Eve meets? I don't know. Does anybody know about any Eve meets we should be talking about?
Well, the one in my area, San Diego, monthly one, we're still having a discussion about whether to have it this month or not. So yeah, sorry.
Awesome. For those of you considering going to FanFest and not sure whether you'd have a good time, but you can have the financials available, I absolutely advocate for sorting it there, getting your tickets sorted, getting your places sorted. Absolutely go to FanFest. It's going to be amazing. That is going on in April, but it is worth mentioning now because people need to set their stuff up soon. Let's go into final shout-outs. Does anybody have any shout-outs they want to give, anything they want to mention before we call this a podcast?
I still have my meetup coming. It's not until the end of May, but it's there. So put it on your radar, everybody.
Is that
I know.
wormholers only, or is everyone welcome?
Everyone is welcome. It's called the Eve Retreat. Someone just linked a link to it there, but it's happening in the Midwest. So for all the people who can't make it to the coasts in the U.S., it'll be held there. Everyone's welcome. We already have quite a few nullsecers coming. It's not going to be just wormholers, so don't worry. We're not going to scare you off, but it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'll be putting it on and organizing it. So yeah, y'all should come. It'll be great.
Just make sure you don't invite Pro God Legend. He might get lost in the meetup.
I mean, so it is just, it is in like Missouri, kind of off the beaten path, but it is a it is a resort. They have luxury cabins. It's actually pretty cheap. Can't beat the money. Everything's cheap in Missouri. You can't beat it. So it'll be a good time.
Is there an organized day trip to Branson to see Dolly Parton?
I don't know about Dolly Parton. We can go see the Liverpool legend Beatles imposters, though. I think they're supposed to be a big hit down there.
Dirk, Carnos, any final points before we wrap this thing up?
Here's to Matterall feeling better.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that.
And,
Look, if you are interested in what Suetonia had to say about assault frigates, go check out Friday Night's Open Comms, where we had him on, and he was talking about assault frigates.
Cool. Ashtarothi, something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that before the show started, we were talking about how there's a lot of major alliances that are celebrating birthdays and other major milestones. Federation Uprising is celebrating our first birthday next month. So my shout out is to all of the large organizations that spend so much time and effort to create such great content for everybody in EVE.
Our
Awesome.
4-year anniversary as a corp is also happening this month. It's very exciting.
PL hit a decade last year, which was pretty darn cool. So yeah, final thank you to McLeod for running the stream. As always, he does a fantastic job and makes us look like an actual, proper, real show. Which, considering it's just a bunch of EVE nerds talking about stuff, that's a fairly large achievement. And we also have a thank you to Abvit85 for subscribers, and also a massive thank you to all our Patreon supporters. Do check in. We discussed before the show that you are going to get some certain privileges and special things coming to you shortly that Masterol can tell you about. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and this is it for this week's Talking in Stations. We will see you same time, same place next Saturday, where hopefully you won't have the Tourney Git talking anymore. We'll be back to the lovable Masterol.
Thanks a lot, guys.